Before I wrap up today's show, I want to talk about Myanmar. And, there's two kind of different aspects of what's going on in Myanmar I want to talk about. The first is the 2017 ethnic cleansing campaign against the Rohingya by the Myanmar military, which was not maybe carried out or authorized rubber stamped by the civilian leader of Myanmar at the time, Aung San Suu Kyi, but at the very least, she helped to cover this up as it was happening. Right, so this is back in 2017, and then in early 2021, I think February 1st is the exact date. The military leadership, or the military leaders of Myanmar, overthrew Aung San Suu Kyi in a military coup and have since held power and thrown her in jail. So those are kind of like almost two separate things going on in Myanmar, and I want to get to the the Rohingya issue first because it involves Facebook right now. I covered this back on Foreign Policy Focus in August of 2017 as it was happening. The military there forced between 700,000 and a million, killed thousands of Rohingya, and they were forced from Myanmar into Bangladesh is where they're living as refugees. And I believe there are now more Rohingya living as refugees in Bangladesh than there are actually living in Myanmar. And this is a group of people that are kind of stateless in Myanmar. The UK, when they were, empire, transported this Muslim minority there to use, I don't know, slave labor, but reduce labor prices at the very least. And this is now the result, that the people of Myanmar don't want them there and have carried out horrible crimes against them. The military was doing terrible things during this ethnic cleansing campaign, like, forcing the people of the Rohingya villages to burn down their homes at gunpoint. And then they were filming the Rohingya burning down their homes, but not showing the soldiers at gunpoint behind them. And then they were using this to claim that this was all a propaganda campaign of the Rohingya to try to blame or smear the Myanmar military or all of that. So since 2017, these people have lived in abject poverty in Bangladesh. Bangladesh isn't a particularly wealthy country to begin with, and so for a country like that, there may be real trade-offs to taking care of this massive population of people. And the conditions in these refugee camps have been absolutely horrific. People have been trampled to death by elephants. People have died in floods. There's crime because it's just a refugee camp. There's no real law and order. And so it's just going to, devolve and I'm sure whoever's got the corrupt connections and everything could get the good products into the different refugee camps. But also Bangladesh has been transferring now thousands of these refugees to a remote island in the Bay of Bengal that frequently floods. And so, this is another massive problem that the Rohingya are facing, is that, now they're being expelled from the country that they're refugees in. And it's not like, that there's a way that they could go to this island and become prosperous. It's essentially maybe a human holding cell for them until they, finally wither away and die as a population. Now, all of this, the campaign in 2017, there was a lot of blame placed on Facebook because of the posts that Facebook allowed that were very anti-Rohingya. Now, it was all in different languages in Myanmar that I don't speak and everything like that. But I don't think there were a lot of people at Facebook that spoke those languages either. And so there's a report that some of those posts may have even been promoted and things like that allowed to happen. And now a court from an African country, it is... what country is this? I'm sorry. It's an African country. I'm sorry. Is suing Facebook and trying to get all those posts that Facebook has since taken down. And I guess they want to use those maybe to hold people accountable in Myanmar, but also pay attention to hold Facebook accountable. And there's actually a good number of Rohingya refugees that now live in the U.S., and they have launched a massive lawsuit against Facebook. They're looking for over $150 billion for, I think probably placing way too much of the blame of the genocide on Facebook, but nonetheless, alleging that Facebook aided this. Now, to some extent, Facebook may have some role and responsibility here. If you're allowing somebody to use your platform to advocate for violence, it may be one thing if somebody puts up a post advocating for violence and then, 2 days later somebody goes out and kills a bunch of people, but then, you ban the account and everything like that. But if then you're getting reports time and time again that, hey, that they're using these platforms to target violence and you're refusing to do anything about it, and, there's actual evidence that it is being used to target violence, then, there may be some fair liability that Facebook would face here. I'm not sure, there's probably a philosophical argument to have there, but I think the Rohingya will have an interesting case. I don't think they'll get or should get $150 billion. And it may be more of an information thing to try to find out like what all these all these posts that Facebook, I think has largely continued to hide. All right, so now moving on and talking about the military coup and the ruling military government that was looking for a seat at the United Nations, but that was denied. They along with the Taliban did not get seats. And, this is one case where I see the point of you don't want to give these terrible groups like legitimacy or whatever the hell you want to call it. But, the Taliban are a legitimate power in Afghanistan, and the same here with the ruling government of Myanmar. And the UN isn't meant to be like some just because the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has a seat at the UN, that doesn't mean that he's supposed to be able to kill Jamal Khashoggi and wage a genocidal war in Yemen and get away with it. That happens regardless of the seat at the UN. And so honestly, I would say like it's probably better to have these groups with seats at the UN so they have an international platform, and people can understand what their goals are, what they want for their countries and everything like that. The ruling military leadership sentenced the former leader initially, that is Aung San Suu Kyi, to 4 years in prison, but then dropped that down to 2 years. I'm not sure why. She was convicted on incitement and breaking coronavirus restrictions. And I just want to note that, I don't know, this may be the longest sentence ever for somebody breaking any kind of COVID violation. Interesting there. And again, this is the government that the Biden administration apparently traded vaccines for to get Danny Fenster released again. The military has had a couple pretty credible claims of killing people in the past couple of weeks. 5 protesters were run down by a military vehicle. I think 4 of them died from the vehicle, and then the security forces shot the 5th. And then there was another situation where security forces killed 11 people. I don't think these are people actively protesting. They may have been dissenters of the government and protesters. The U.S. is all outraged about this, and the State Department spokesperson Ned Price put out a whole statement. Initially, I had a mistake on this story, by the way, in my news roundup. I had claimed the soldiers burned these people to death. The soldiers killed them first and then burned their bodies afterwards. Not that that's much better, but that is at least the reports from international press. The U.S. here is saying that they burned them alive, but I'm pretty sure that the international story of them burning them after they were shot is the true case here. And then last story today, the U.S. has announced new sanctions on Myanmar. Just like the Syrian sanctions, these were in celebration of Biden's Summit for Democracy, a massive failure that maybe I'll talk about later in the week. Certainly get into a little bit more when I talk talk about China with Connor Freeman on the next show. But yeah, that's what I got for today's show. More sanctions on Myanmar, more punishment for the country, the people who are definitely suffering enough. And, while I'm not saying that the U.S. government should be, say, working out deals and trading bad scenes to the Myanmar ruling military leaders, I would, not be sanctioning that government. All right, that's where I'm wrapping.